Now let's discuss some terms you'll need to understand as we break down how deeds work. When we talk about deeds, we are talking about a written document used to convey title or transfer ownership. Some deed restrictions may be put in place to limit or control the ways that the property can be used, but keep in mind that deed restrictions cannot be discriminatory. In the case of a foreclosure, a homeowner, otherwise known as a mortgager, voluntarily conveys the deed to the lender, otherwise known as the mortgagee, in order to satisfy the debt to avoid foreclosure on their credit record. This process is known as a deed in lieu of foreclosure. An easement allows someone other than the property owner the right to be on or use the land for a specific purpose. If an easement is recorded on the title of a property, the easement will survive any transfer of title of that property. Be sure to remember that trust deeds are non-judicial, meaning that no court of action is required in order to foreclose on a property. Mortgages, however, have judicial foreclosures, meaning that court of action is required to foreclose on a property. One helpful tip here: if you see the words assigner, grantor, or mortgager, these are all words that mean that the person in the role has the right to transfer, assign, or convey the servicing rights or ownership of the property. The words like assignee, mortgagee, or grantee, for example, refers to the party who is receiving the transfer of contractual rights or receiving the title transfer. There are 4 types of legal descriptions for properties: the monument method, the government land survey method, the lot and block method, and the metes and bounds method. What you need to know about these 4 descriptions of property is that the lot and block method is the most commonly used, but the metes and bounds method is the most accurate because the surveyors must start and end their measurements at the point of the beginning, otherwise known as POB. Remember, a property survey is required and also certified by not only lenders, but also the buyers and title insurers. There are a few things regarding insurance that are essential for you to know for the exam. The first is that hazard insurance covers loss or damage from a fire or other disaster. Hazard insurance must be paid 1 year in advance and must be effective the day a loan closes. Flood insurance, however, is not covered under a homeowner's hazard insurance, which is why flood insurance must be purchased from the National Flood Insurance Program, otherwise known as NFIP. The way the flood potential is measured by is what's known as a special flood hazard area. A special flood hazard area is where a flood event having a 1% or more possibility of occurring on the property. There are 3 different flood zones you need to understand. The first is a low-risk flood zone, known as zones C or X. A property in the low-risk flood zone does not require flood insurance. The second flood zone is a moderate flood zone known as zones B or X. A property in the moderate flood zone is optional. The third and final flood zone is a high-risk flood zone known as zones A or V. The high-risk flood zones do require flood insurance. If a homeowner fails to keep the home insured, a lender has the right to put what's known as forced placed insurance on the property to cover the lender's interest in the home, not the contents of the home. Now, when we talk about real estate, it's important that you understand that real estate includes not only the land, but also the structures on the land, as well as air rights and mineral rights. Now, keep in mind, real estate tax liens have priority over all other liens and must be paid off first in the event of a foreclosure. Remember, concurrent ownership of a property refers to the title of one piece of property and is owned by more than one person at any given time. There are 3 types of concurrent real estate ownership. The first is tenancy in common, the second is joint tenancy, and the third is tenancy by entirety. Tenancy in common refers to 2 or more people buy the same piece of property and everyone's share can be sold or willed. In a tenancy in common, the people involved in the ownership of the property do not have to have an equal share of the property, nor do they have to buy it at the same time. Joint tenants, however, is a form of ownership that includes 2 or more parties buying the same property at the same time in equal shares, and they cannot be willed to beneficiaries. Tenancy by entirety is a form of ownership specifically between 2 people who are married to one another. Both spouses own equal, undivided ownership of the property, and one may not sell their share of the property without the consent of the other. There are 3 approaches to estimate property value that are essential to know for the SAFE exam. These are known as the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. The sales comparison approach is where an appraiser investigates a minimum of 3 closed sales of properties that are similar in characteristics to the property. The sales comparison approach is for both residential property in addition to vacant land. When using the cost approach, an appraiser estimates the cost to reproduce or replace the structures. This type of approach is used for new construction and for special use properties. And lastly, the income approach analyzes revenue that a property could generate. This approach is most often used for commercial and investment property. A freehold estate is a type of real property that comes with indefinite ownership. There are 2 types of freehold estates. The first is known as fee simple, and the other is known as life estate. A fee simple is the highest type of personal property interest in the law. In a fee simple, an owner has complete ownership without any forms of restriction, and an owner can pass it down to their heirs. In a life estate, also known as a freehold estate, this is a method of transitioning property to their heirs. In a life estate, the owner shares joint ownership with the inheritor, and any changes that the owner does to the home or property must be approved by the inheritor. Once the owner passes away, the inheritor, also known as the beneficiary, takes ownership without the need of probate court. Now, when we discuss the acronym known as ARM, we are talking about adjustable rate mortgages. A fully indexed ARM is composed of the index rate plus the margin. Now, it's important that you understand that the index is a statistical report that is used as an indicator of the cost of borrowing money. Some common indexes you'll need to know for the exam is known as Prime, COFI, COFI, COSI, COSI, and LIBOR, LIBOR. You need to know that the index is flexible. It can go up and down over the life of the loan. I remember that the index is flexible because I like to think of it as my index finger. My index finger can move up and down. The margin, however, is a preset amount of interest that remains the same over the life of the loan. So remember, the index is flexible, the margin is fixed. Now, every ARM has caps on them, which refers to the maximum amount that the ARM can adjust over a set period of time. There are 3 types of caps. The first is the initial cap, the second is the periodic cap, and the third is the life cap. The initial cap only applies and refers to the first rate adjustment. The periodic cap applies to all of the adjustment periods thereafter. And the life cap sets the maximum number of percentage points that a rate may increase over the life of the loan. There are also interest rate caps, which limits the number of percentage points that the interest rate can increase or decrease. The floor is a term that is used to indicate the lowest interest rate that an ARM can adjust. Sometimes an ARM has what's called a teaser rate, which is an introductory rate that is lower than the fully indexed rate. So let's go over an example together. If you see a 3/2/8, this would mean that the loan would adjust 3% at the very first adjustment period. This is the first adjustment following the introductory rate or possibly the teaser rate. After that first 3% adjustment, the ARM will adjust up or down 2% at every adjustment period thereafter, but it could only adjust up to 8% from where it started over the life of the loan. Sometimes there are only two numbers, such as a 3/8. If you see this, that means that the initial rate adjustment and the periodic rate adjustment are the same. And in this case, it would be a 3% initial, 3% periodic, and 8% lifetime. Don't confuse this when it has the word ARM come after it. If you see something that says 3/1 ARM, that isn't referring to the rate caps. It's referring to the ARM being fixed for 3 years and then adjusting annually. Be sure that when you see ARMS questions on the test, you read the last part of the question of what they are asking first, so you are answering what they are asking. They will often give you way more information than what you need to solve the problem. So be sure that you are make sure that you're answering exactly what they're asking.